I'm Luann Beninati from Let's Grow Kids, and we appreciate you all taking the time out of your busy days to be with us here to talk about the child care bill. I have to note that because of the work of longtime advocates, including many of you here, we have, hot off the press, just introduced last week, a child care bill. It's a momentous occasion, and we don't want to lose sight of that. And we're also reminded to look back to your schoolhouse rock days to remember that the introduction of a bill is just the beginning of working toward a policy. It's our job as Vermonters to work with policymakers to ensure that the end result is a good one, and to remember, as we advocate here in Vermont, that we have legislators who truly care about the well-being of our kids. So today we have Sarah Kenny, Chief Policy Officer, and Drake Turner, Government Relations Director from Let's Grow Kids, here to get us up to speed on where things are today. Some of you who attended last week's public briefing that Let's Grow Kids held the day after the bill was introduced got some information. Today, with early educators like you all, who are much more knowledgeable about the details and the specifics in the bill, we're able to go a bit deeper. This, of course, is off the cuff, off the record, a conversation with informed early educators that have spent some time really looking into the specifics of the bill and have some questions. And Sarah and Drake are going to help us with those. Remember, it's still early and there's a lot we don't know, but things are moving. I want to add that we've built in plenty of time for Q&A, but because of the number of folks interested in the session, we had to set this up as a webinar. We'll manage the Q&A, and I'll relay the questions to Drake and Sarah, and we'll also talk about next steps for questions and thoughts that we might not be able to address in 1 hour. Without any more delay, I want to hand this over to Drake and Sarah to get us started.
Thanks, Luann, and hi, everyone. It's so great to see so many of your names in our participant list. We keep on getting so many people interested in these conversations that we have to flip to webinar, which is great, but also means that we can't see all of your faces, but we know you're here with us in spirit. So I'm Sarah Kenny. I'm the Chief Policy Officer here at Let's Grow Kids, and I've had the pleasure of working with many of you over the last several years to get us to this place where we have a bill in the legislature, which is a really exciting moment that we have been celebrating. And I will reaffirm for all of us here that this bill is a starting point. So we need to be really clear about that. And legislators will now spend the coming weeks and months taking testimony and debating and shaping a final version to bring to a vote. And the bill is starting in the Senate. The Senate Health and Welfare Committee has started their deliberations on the bill. So we'll go through this whole process in the Senate where they take testimony, they discuss amongst themselves. It goes through other committees where they also debate, take testimony, discuss, they continue to shape the bill, and then it will pass the Senate and then go to the House where we'll do this all over again. And then the bill will be sent to Governor Scott for approval. So what you see now in this 107-page bill is almost certainly not what the final bill is going to look like. And so please don't get attached to anything in this initial version of the bill because it will almost certainly all change. So that's great news, and your voices are going to be so important in the shaping of what this bill looks like when all the process is over here. So the more that lawmakers hear from stakeholders, the more likely it is that we'll have the strongest possible final bill when all is said and done by the end of the session in May. Legislators need to hear from you all how details in the bill would affect you and the children and families in your community. So we're going to talk through a little bit here about what we like as a starting point in the bill, areas where we see room for improvement in the bill, and then we will field questions. I just want to reaffirm what Luann said, that this is an off the record, more sort of casual conversation. So we really want to hear from you all in the chat and Q&A. What are your questions? And we'll respond to as many as we can. So I'm going to turn it over to Drake to start us off with what we really like in the bill as a starting point, and then I'll talk about some of the areas where we already see that there's room for improvement. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps and do Q&A. Go for it, Drake.
Thanks, Sarah. And hi, everyone. I hope everyone's having a nice sunny Tuesday. I keep thinking it's Wednesday, but it is still Tuesday. So I want to walk through some of the components of the bill that we're really excited about as a starting point. And really, as Sarah mentioned, this bill is 107 pages, and I'm going to be talking about some of the components that start on page 96. So for those of you who have not had time to read a 107-page bill, you may not have seen these pieces. But in addition to doing a number of things, the bill proposes a number of really important changes to the Child Care Financial Assistance Program for children starting at birth up to age 5 that I just want to quickly walk you all through, and then I'll hand things back over to Sarah. So as introduced, the bill proposes calculating payments to programs based on the true cost of care, which would be inclusive of increased compensation for early childhood educators, instead of calculating payments based on market rates, which is the current system for CCFAP. It would also expand eligibility for families up to 450% of the federal poverty level by July of 2024. Currently, eligibility caps out at 350%. So that's a great starting point. But we're eager to push for more families to be eligible for the program. So we're excited for those conversations. The bill also asks DCF to work with Building Bright Futures to establish a tiered professional compensation standard for employees in childcare programs by 2024. It would provide additional funding for staff retention payments to childcare programs, including family childcare home providers in 2023. It would also switch to an enrollment-based payment system instead of using attendance-based payments. I know that's something that folks have been working on for a number of years. It would also remove all work, education, and health eligibility requirements in CCFAP so that eligibility for the program would be determined solely based on family income. And then the bill also proposes creating a non-citizen child care assistance program for families who aren't eligible for CCFAP due to citizenship status. So there are a number of really important changes to CCFAP that we're excited about. And then there are just a couple of other changes in the bill that we're excited about are creating a new property tax exemption for family child care home programs, as well as for property owners that provide space to child care programs for at least 25% below fair market value. And the bill also provides additional funding for early childhood educator scholarships, which we know have been increasingly popular, and that there's still really a demand for out in the field. So a way to bring more folks into the field and to help early educators continue to advance in their profession and gain more credentials. So those are all really exciting pieces of the bill. And I think because they come so late in the actual bill draft, I think a lot of folks aren't necessarily seeing them. So we just want to make sure that folks are aware of those components. And then I will throw it over to Sarah for a discussion of some of the parts of the bill that we're excited on working to improve.
Thanks, Drake. So there are a couple of components in the first 95 pages of the bill that we want to talk through a little bit more, and that are opportunities to continue to improve on the bill. So the first is that it proposes a series of pretty sweeping changes to Vermont's universal pre-K program that would have consequences for families and for childcare programs. So it requires that all public schools must offer universal, voluntary, full school day, school year pre-K to all 4-year-olds in their district, either in their school buildings or by contracting with a neighboring school district. So that would remove all 3-year-olds from Vermont's Act 166 Universal Pre-K program, and it would remove private partner programs from the Universal Pre-K system. So it would still allow childcare programs in the state to provide care for 4-year-olds, but those families would need to choose to attend that private program using childcare financial assistance support if they were eligible for it, or paying out of pocket if they were not eligible for CCFAP. So those are really big changes that would have pretty significant impacts for families and for children and on our current robust mixed delivery system in the state. So we can talk more about that in Q&A. It's not clear to us that this proposal would preserve our mixed delivery system and maintain the critical support that that provides for families. So, and then the next big section of the bill proposes some significant governance changes that in our reading do not align with the recommendations of the systems analysis report that was commissioned by the legislature. So the way that it's structured in the bill, they would create a deputy secretary for early childhood education at the Agency of Education. And that deputy secretary would be overseeing all early childhood and special education in the Agency of Education, and would likely be overseeing all of that, the 4-year-olds in public schools, new design of universal pre-K. And then on the Agency of Human Services side, it would essentially split the current Department for Children and Families into 2 departments. So they would create a new Department of Economic Empowerment that would be overseeing child support, economic opportunity, disability determination, and economic services. So the more sort of economic focused components of the current work of DCF. And then the current DCF would remain, but would have narrowed down focus of scope of work. So DCF would have responsibility for the child development, was now the child development division, family services, children with special health needs, and then also maternal and child health would come over from the Department of Health into DCF. So those are the changes that the bill proposes in the state governance structure for early childhood education. Again, in our reading, does not align with the early childhood systems analysis report that came out last summer that was commissioned by the legislature that recommended a single empowered entity in the state to oversee early childhood education across all state agencies. So those 2 sections are, the whole bill is going to be subject for a lot of conversation in the coming weeks, those 2 sections specifically. And so I'll talk a little bit, Luann, if it makes sense, about kind of next steps and where the bill is headed, and then we can dive into questions and answers, if that makes sense. I want to start by just acknowledging that so many of you have been directing really great questions to us, and it's clear that you have read the bill, which is really impressive because you are absurdly busy and you still managed to read through a 107-page bill, which is pretty complicated and contains pages and pages and pages of cross-references. So great job, everybody. And you are asking all the right questions, I would say. So, and there are questions that a lot of legislators have too. So the way this process works, the bill was introduced in the Senate, and there is going to be a companion bill introduced in the House in the next day or 2 that will have some slight differences in at least in the pre-K sections from what we understand. But the bill is going to be, they're going to be starting with the bill in the Senate. So the version that was introduced in the Senate, S56, is being taken up right now by the Senate Health and Welfare Committee. They took testimony on Friday. They did a walkthrough of the bill where the attorney who works for the legislature who wrote the bill walked them through section by section, kind of what everything means and what's in the bill. And then this morning they took some somewhat detailed testimony from the Child Development Division about sort of the state of childcare right now and how current CCFAP works and how the childcare system payment structure works right now. So kind of orienting themselves. The Senate Health and Welfare Committee has 5 members, and 3 of them are brand new to the legislature and learning very quickly all about childcare. So they've been doing some sort of level setting in the committee. This Friday, they're going to take another morning of testimony from a panel of national experts who are going to be specifically coming in to talk to them about national best practice, both for structuring childcare financial assistance subsidies, talking about how to compensate early childhood educators, talking about best practices for mixed delivery and universal pre-K. So those, they're going to start out sort of with the national scene around what's national best practice, what are other states doing, what course should Vermont pursue. And then in the next 2 weeks, they will be taking more testimony from witnesses who will be impacted by different components of the bill, including childcare programs and early childhood educators and families, and other folks who have different sort of provisions in the bill, will be impacted by different provisions in the bill. So that's the plan. And so that's the Senate Health and Welfare Committee. At the same time, the Senate Education Committee will be talking specifically about the universal pre-K components of the bill. And Senate Health and Welfare will be talking about universal pre-K from the perspective of how it impacts childcare programs who are currently partnering with school districts to provide universal pre-K. So they want to hear if there are any unintended consequences of what's in the bill on the childcare programs that are partnering in universal pre-K. So that will be part of the conversation moving forward. And then the Senate Education Committee will be talking about what's in the bill for universal pre-K. Is it a good idea? Will it work in schools? Or what are the impacts of what's there. And then the bill will go to the Senate Appropriations and Finance Committees. The bill does not currently have any funding in it or a mechanism to pay for it. But the Appropriations and Finance Committees will be working on that. So there is what they call a fiscal note in the works, where the legislature's fiscal analysts are doing an analysis of how much this would all cost with everything that's in the bill. And then the Appropriations Committee will be discussing the overall costs. And the Finance Committee is talking about how to raise the revenue that'll be necessary to fund a system that provides the level of comprehensive child care financial assistance that is embedded in the bill. And then it'll be voted on by the whole Senate and then go over to the House, where we'll do the whole thing all over again. And the House Human Services Committee will kick it off, and then many other committees over there will be weighing in as well. So what that all means is that there are a lot of opportunities for them to hear all of your voices about what's great in the bill, what will help your programs, what potential impacts they might not have considered of some of the policy proposals in the bill. So there's lots of opportunity, both in writing, to connect with the committee and individual legislators. They will be taking, in the Senate, testimony will be somewhat more limited just because they don't have as much time. And then there'll be more opportunities in the House to provide testimony about how these proposals would impact families and children in your program and the business operations of your programs as well. So.
This was a lot, and it was great information. And I know this is a group that, you know, as we've already could tell by answering the questions, really is sophisticated in their knowledge about the system and what's in this bill. Can we talk a little bit about what are some next steps? I know, Drake covered a lot of it already by being in touch and, you know, what's coming next, but maybe a few specific next steps that people could take on.
So next steps, yes. So the committee is going to be taking testimony over the next couple of weeks. As I said, they're going to be taking some quite limited testimony because they don't have a lot of time. But there will be certainly some child care programs talking to them about what are the potential impacts of the legislation on their operations and on the children and families in their care. There are lots of opportunities to connect with your legislators. Folks can be taking action through Let's Grow Kids if you want. We have a lot of advocacy forums and our dashboard available for people to contact legislators. I just want to reiterate that the framing that we're using is gratitude first, right? Like, thank you for your commitment to solving the childcare crisis in Vermont, to making sure that we are really supporting families and children and the childcare programs that serve them and not having unintended consequences. Here's the situation in my childcare program right now. Here's what the impacts of the really great ideas would be and what some of the challenges might be. And so folks can communicate directly to your legislators, or we can be sending emails to committees to let them know. And I believe that there's work being done, Luann, right, maybe on a letter specifically expressing some concerns around the pre-K sections and what works well. So that will be a sign-on opportunity that folks can look for. There'll be more information coming soon about that, I think, right?
Yes, we've heard from some advocates that they are working on crafting a letter that includes a lot of the concerns or issues that folks are commonly bringing up among childcare providers across the state. And so as that comes to fruition, we'll make sure that you get connected with that. We also are available to come and talk. We're having meetings with, you know, directors groups and early childhood networks. If you have a group of your colleagues that want more information and want to have a discussion, we can come, and most often but via Zoom, because you're all over the state, but we can come and have conversations with you if it's helpful. So you can reach out to us for that purpose too. I just want to end with, first of all, gratitude for Sarah and Drake in the representation that you all offer in the State House, and the reminder of that we are, the early childhood field, are your equal partners in this work that the legislators are doing. And so addressing this from a positive equal perspective, thanking the legislators who are working hard on trying to craft legislation that does the best for children and families and the early childhood workforce in Vermont, and using your voice in a way that's positive and proactive. So there's much more to come. Things are moving quickly, and we will be keeping you in the loop as much as we can. Make sure you are in the loop to get the sort of Sherry Carlson emails to the early education workforce that come out from Let's Grow Kids. We try to loop you in through those. Reach out anytime, and I hope you have a nice afternoon with your kiddos, and we will be in touch. Thank you all very much.